Welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. If you have not listened to the last two episodes that we have been talking with Brannon Moncrief from McLarren and Associates, you need to go back and listen to these last two. There are many moments on this podcast that I make an idiot of myself, but this last episode in particular, there was on-air learning occurring for sure on my part as I finally understood these different DSO deal structures and how it even makes sense for these EBITDA multipliers. And so it might be an episode you're taking notes. It might be an episode you listen to multiple times. Highly recommend going back and listening to the last episode. Brannon, thank you for coming back for a third episode to talk about this a little bit more.
Absolutely. Part 3. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we teased the end of the last episode on some stories. Like I want some stories. We're gonna, we're scrubbing names, change the cities and change the details. But you said last time that when people come to you, they're not just like, hey, I've been maybe thinking about selling to a DSO. Usually they come to you with, hey, I'm about to close on this deal with a DSO, and someone told me I should come talk to you. Is this a good deal? Tell me an example of this that's happened recently.
Yeah, I would say, at least 50% of our clients are already in conversations with the DSO. A lot of them already have an offer on the table. Hopefully they haven't signed a letter of intent before they call us, because there are some restrictions in letters of intent that don't allow you to have an advisor and don't allow you to shop. So you need to know that as well. DSOs will tell you, oh, don't worry about the letter of intent. It's non-binding. Yeah, except for one thing. Exclusivity. You can't talk to anybody else. You can't hire an advisor. You can't shop the deal once you sign an offer. But also,
which is different than like a normal practice transition LOI. Like a normal practice transition LOI is fairly non-binding. Like
pretty much everything in a traditional doctor-to-doctor sale LOI is non-binding. There is no exclusivity provision. So you need to pay attention to that. Don't ink an offer until you've gotten the proper counsel, built a proper team, and you're really educated about what's out there, and you've created a competitive environment of plenty of optionality before you commit to selling to a particular DSO. But all the time, people call us and say, hey, Brannon, I've been talking to, sometimes it's multiple DSOs, sometimes they already have multiple offers on the table. What do you know about these DSOs? Is this a good offer? And
I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire. Well, let's change the city name. But there was an example you guys told me at the DEO conference, and you just shared it with our group here at Shared Practices. Mm-hmm. Let's say it was in Houston. Okay. So this guy approaches you, large single-site GP practice, right?
Yep, large multi-doctor practice in a major metro area, suburb of a major metro area. 3.6 million in top-line revenue.
Yeah.
1.3 million in EBITDA. He was looking at going down the DSO road because he was going to retire, likely in a 3 to 5 year window, and he wanted some help at the tail end of his career from an operational administrative perspective. So given the size of his practice, given the EBITDA level, and given his runway, it made a lot of sense for him to look at going down the DSO path as opposed to considering a more traditional practice sale. And he had a buddy that sold to a particular DSO, and his buddy referred him to that DSO and suggested they have a conversation. By the way, that DSO was likely paying his buddy for that referral, because those are the types of things that happen in this industry. There's a lot of money that exchanges hands under the table for looks at deals.
Right.
And he talked to this DSO, really liked the DSO, and got an offer for $7 million, which he thought, comparatively speaking to a private deal, he was like, this is crazy. This is amazing.
That even to me is surprising of like, okay, a $3.6 million practice. You said how much in EBITDA?
1.3. It was very profitable.
1.3. That's a phenomenal practice, but still, like that's a bigger valuation than I think I initially would have expected for that size of a practice.
Yeah, he was thrilled with it, but he didn't know how good it could be.
Sure.
So one of his advisors recommended that he reach out to us, and we had a conversation, and we just said, hey, my advice is to back away from that offer. Just hit pause. Don't end the conversation. Just hit pause. Let us do an EBITDA analysis. Let us do a valuation. That's a private conversation between us. And he agreed. And we spent a few weeks to go through his numbers, and we arrived at EBITDA of 1.3 million. And we felt like, conservatively, if we took the practice to the open market in a blind bid process, that's typically how we market our practices. We don't put an asking price on them. We put them out to market to bid to all the DSOs that we think could be a good fit. Might be anywhere from 10 to 20 DSOs, depending on the opportunity. We told him, hey, we think we can get $8.5 million for it. Like a baseline expectation. This would be the minimum that I think the practice will trade for. But if we have a lot of competition, a lot of bids, we can drive up the valuation considerably.
I love this process because there's this game of chicken of like, well, what's it worth? And the buyer's like, well, you know, what do you want to sell it for? And the seller's like, well, I don't know. What are you going to pay for it? And you're taking this because you can pull the number of bidders in your favor, this blind bid of like, name a price, and there's 19 other DSOs bidding on this. They have to like get serious.
Keeps them honest.
Before we keep going, I'd like to talk to you about practice by numbers. So early on in the Shared Practices podcast, we were sponsored by PBN. And then we made the decision to switch to Dental Intel. And in that experience, I got to know both companies quite well. So I thought what would be a great opportunity for me is to explain to you why I made the switch back from Dental Intel to PBN and why I think you should probably make the switch to PBN from wherever you're at. So I think the biggest thing is, and this was the biggest oversight that I had in this entire process, and I'll call this my single biggest blunder of my professional career in terms of the wrong decision I've made. And the thing that I overlooked in that switch was the development team. So Practice by Numbers is a development-driven company. And from the time that I switched, when they were an analytics company, to the time that I went back, they became an all-on-one platform. And what that really means is they are a single software product to run your entire office that is integrated. And that was the biggest frustration that I had reached with Dental Intel was it was sort of the combination of three different software products, and it didn't give me that integrated experience, and you still sort of needed other products as well to kind of complete your suite of software services. And with Practice by Numbers, I not only saw the analytics that I'd come to really like, but also I had really seen an entire platform of online bookings, forms, payments, analytics, patient follow-ups, really everything an office needs in a singular place. And I came to the gut-wrenching realization that was I'm going to have to switch one day. And it's going to be easier now than it'll be tomorrow. So I made the switch. And honestly, I'd recommend you do the same. PBN is, in my opinion, the leading software product in dentistry. And it's something I did not anticipate 18 months ago, but now it's very apparent that they are the best software for a dental practice, period, due to the all-in-one platform and best in class across the board. So if you're interested in switching to Practice by Numbers, I'd highly suggest you go to practicebynumbers.com and learn more about it.
They have to like get serious.
Keeps them honest. They've got to put their best foot forward because they know that if they're not near market where it should trade for, they're going to get outbid. And the other thing is, especially right now, in a market where there's a lot of movement because of the macroeconomic conditions we're dealing with, elevated interest rates, constrained capital markets, some DSOs are on their heels and not being super aggressive from a valuation perspective. Other DSOs are still flush with cash and have plenty of capital and want to grow. So right now, when you take something like this to market, you'll see offers vary by the millions from offer to offer. So that's why it's really important to use the bid process. So when we got through the valuation, he was like, well, I mean, $8.5 million is a lot better than $7 million, even if I factor in your fee. Are you sure that you think you can generate this result? Because I'm going to have to pay you a fee regardless of the result. And I said, look, check our references, check our reputation. This is what we do.
Yeah.
I'll get you at least $8.5 million. So he agreed, signed a listing agreement. We took the practice to market. Over 6 weeks, we got 7 offers. We ran a relatively narrow process. There were certain buyers he didn't want to talk to.
Sure.
Certain deal structures he didn't want to entertain. I think we put it out to bid to 12 DSOs. We got 7 offers. Ultimately, the practice sold for $10.5 million. So $3.5 million more than that unsolicited offer. Guess who it sold to? It sold to the same DSO
same buyer
that was already at the table, that simply by holding their feet to the fire, creating a competitive environment, and controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA, that's important as well, we got him $3.5 million more. He was happy to pay our commission,
to say the least,
on the closing date.
Yeah.
So I could tell stories like that over and over and over again. And on the last episode, we talked about the cost average game that private equity plays and how they generate arbitrage. When they buy practices off market compared to in a bid process, it's also a cost average game. So let me kind of explain what I mean by that. So let's say a DSO is going to buy 10 offices, okay? And their goal is to be at a cost average of, let's say, 6.5 times EBITDA on those 10 offices. Well, they're going to buy, because of all the business development and all the referral channels they have, they're going to do a lot of off-market proprietary deals. They might buy 7 or 8 of those 10 practices directly from the doctor that doesn't have representation. They don't have somebody like me at the table. And they're going to underpay for them. They're going to pay, let's say, 5.5 cost average for those practices. Well, that means that they've got the bandwidth. They've got the room
to overpay
for the other 2 or 3 practices they're going to buy out of that 10 practice bucket that I'm going to represent. It's just a cost average game at the end of the day.
So the funny thing is, this instantly reminds me of the strategy that we tell our pre-owners to do, which is to find an off-market deal by sending mailers. So like, build your own creepy database of all the dentists in the area that you want to go to. You can sort a lot of times on the licensed list. You can kind of figure out who the older ones are and target those, or build a list that way, and send them these mailers. And we've got examples, and we've got people who've done this successfully to find these deals that just were not on the market. DSOs,
no different, right?
Are trying to do this. This is the ultimate strategy of the DSOs: is the unsolicited offers.
Buy low, sell high.
They want to buy low. And actually, if your DSO is really good at this, that you're talking with, that means they have more room to overpay for the deal that comes along. If they don't have enough deals coming in, they're like, okay, occasionally we buy a practice for 4x EBITDA, but we would do those all day, every day, but we can't find enough of them.
Right.
We have more capital to deploy. That means we can afford to do some 8, 9, 10x deals, possibly.
That's correct. And, I don't love the word overpay, but I guess that's the appropriate word to use. There's no better word to use. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if they couldn't afford it, they wouldn't pay it.
Sure.
There's still money to be made, and they're playing that cost average game. And if they accomplish their financial goals, even if they're paying 8, 9x for practices, if they can utilize leverage, be a good operator, and sell for 15x at recap, they're still making money. So, we just make sure that our clients get every dollar that they deserve. And unfortunately, on the other side of that, there's doctors that are getting taken advantage of that are not working, with somebody like us, and that don't have proper representation. So that's a story that I could tell over and over again, but I think it's a good segue into talking about, what are the top mistakes that dentists make when they look to go down the DSO, private equity road. So love to unpack that.
Yeah.
You want to hop in?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the first one is responding to an unsolicited offer.
Yep.
Right? Oftentimes doctors will respond to a direct mailer or a referral from a buddy, and they'll talk to a DSO, and a very casual conversation will quickly turn into a very serious conversation.
Well, and it gets really enticing, because especially if their mind has been in the world of regular valuations, that 80, 90, 100% of collections, they're like, okay, that's kind of the max that you can get. And all of a sudden we're talking, you talked about a deal that was almost 3x of collections.
I can talk about another one that just brings, we had a doctor recently, pedo practice in Indiana, and they were looking at selling to a private buyer. They were about to list with another broker, selling to a private buyer at a valuation of $2.2 million. He really had never thought about the DSO option, and he got referred to us by his consultant. And we took a look at the practice, and we thought, it had like $1 million in EBITDA. We figured we could get $7.5 million for it, compared to $2.2 million.
Yeah.
We took it to market. We got 9 offers. It traded for $8.5 million.
Wow.
So he was thrilled.
Yeah.
So comparative to the private buyer sale, all the DSO offers look good, even the unsolicited offers, right?
Right.
But you just don't know how good they could be,
right,
if you respond to one.
Right. Okay, so that's mistake number one. We've got failure to create competition. We talked about this a little bit last time, and you know, we even talked about this time. This blind bid of making sure that that's how you get leverage. I mean, it's the same thing when you renegotiate a lease. You don't want to wait until your lease is expired and the landlord's like, you don't have time to move out or find anything else or build something else. You're screwed because your business, I've got leverage on you because you have to sign the lease or I can kick you out.
And you can't build out a space quick enough
to continue to operate your business. So that's why you want to make sure if your lease is going to expire in a year and a half, that's when you start shopping, because that's when you could legitimately go do a startup somewhere else and you can start the lease negotiation process well ahead of time, and you've got the leverage if you can have other offers and other options on the table.
Creating competition does two things. It provides you with the leverage to negotiate the most favorable economic outcome, the highest valuation, the best deal terms, negotiating all the nuances of the deal structures that we talked about on the previous episode, and it provides you with optionality. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
Every DSO is different. I say this all the time. If you met one DSO, you met one DSO. They're all different culturally, operationally, from a management perspective. They all have different deal structures, different financial sponsor that are a different stage in their recap cycle. How do you know who's the best fit if you're only talking to one?
Right.
You need broad perspective of what's available in the marketplace in order to find the right fit. So it's not solely about maximizing economics. It's also about finding the right fit and the right deal structure.
Well, and it's funny because based on the last episode, the other reason I'd want competition is, ironically, I would love if I was in this circumstance where I was selling a single site and I didn't mind doing like a holdco or joint venture. Like I wanted more equity to carry forward and roll forward with the group. I would want to be in a smaller DSO.
Potentially.
That maybe has 50 locations, but I know that like operationally they're really good. The way their buying practices is really sound, versus one that has potentially 300 locations. And I think like my holdback equity has the potential to grow bigger possibly. So it's like, but having those options based on what your goals are and your time horizon, like that's nice that you then have that. You've got the 50, you've got the 100, you've got the 300 location group, and they have different visions and ways of operating, and you can compare all of those things against each other.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients, it's really surprising. Before we go to market, we talk a lot about the why and your goals and, you know, what deal structure are you likely going to gravitate to? But we always tell them, hey, let's show you everything.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes once you start to meet the people, once this becomes real and you start to really understand how these groups function and how their identity is different from group to group, we'll have clients pivot mid-process.
Yeah.
We thought they were going to go for a holding company model, but then they fall in love with the joint venture model, or they fall in love with a particular DSO. And if you don't have optionality, how would you have ever, gotten to that place?
Well, and that goes into the next mistake, which was selling to the wrong DSO. And like, this is a hard decision to make. It's still hard, even if you're talking to a bunch of different people, to like judge how is it going to be to work with them. You're not working with them currently. But like, that is my advice when I've talked to people in the past. This is before I had talked to you and you've had you on the podcast. But like, one of the biggest factors for me would be, do you want to partner with these people? Like, do you want to work with them? Because like, they are going to be essentially your boss.
You're not going anywhere for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And if you can't work with them, if you're already almost like sick of them by the time you get to the closing table, like, you're not going to want to work with them for the next 2 to 3 years, and you're going to be miserable. You're going to feel trapped. You're going to feel resentful. You're going to feel frustrated, even though you've got all this money in the bank. So having those conversations, talking with, and this is, I wrote an article for Dental Town. This is back before I started working for Howard Fran, before I helped him with his podcast, before Shared Practices was started. And it was about choosing 1-year AEGD or GPR residencies. And my point with all of it was, you can't know what's happening in that residency until you talk with current and former residents. So you can't know what's happening in a DSO until you talk with current people who've just recently sold and people who've sold and been with them for 2 or 3 years. So how common is that? How easy is it to talk with current doctors who are then part of that organization?
It's very easy, and we recommend it in almost every circumstance. When we're marketing a practice and we start to narrow in on a particular buyer as a front runner, we've done some initial diligence, right? We do a lot of diligence before we ever allow a DSO to sit at the table with one of our clients.
Okay, so you've got a minimum filter already.
Oh, yeah. We've already put them through a minimal filter, and then we're going to help the client do diligence as we start to narrow in on a potential buyer. The selling to the wrong DSO is typically a product of one of two things or both. It's not doing the proper diligence on the DSO, not having a filter like us, and then asking the right questions during the vetting process, and then interviewing some of the doctors that have been partnered with that DSO, short-term and long-term, to figure out, what is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's amazing how much some of those doctors will disclose.
Will say.
Especially if we can find doctors that were not referred by the DSO. They're partnered with that DSO.
Right.
But we weren't given their names.
They weren't on the
DSO.
Curated list of here's the doctors that we know will only say good things about us.
Exactly. So failing to do the proper diligence, we believe that diligence is a two-way street. Just as the DSOs are going to ask you 1,000,000 questions and ask for 1,000,000 data points on your practice to formulate an offer and to close the deal, you should be asking a ton of questions. We actually give our clients 25 questions to ask during the initial Zoom call or in-person meeting with each DSO that's expressed an interest in their practice. And then once we narrow the pool down to the top, let's say 2 or 3 buyers, then we're going to want those reference checks where they actually speak with doctors that are partnered with that particular DSO to learn about, what has life actually been like, partnered with that DSO over the course of some period of time. And the other mistake that can lead to selling to the wrong DSO is not clearly defining your why, right? Not clearly defining your goals. You've got to think about what you're trying to accomplish. Is it purely economic? Are you looking for operational and infrastructure support? Are you looking for capital support? Are you looking to take a step back? Or are you looking to lean into the business and continue to scale it? Not all DSOs are created equal in that regard. Some DSOs are very hands-off. They're not great operators. They don't have much infrastructure. It's more of an economic play. I would also argue that to some degree, those DSOs are the ones that are in duress right now, where the institutional investors on the back end of a recap are saying, is this really a sustainable business? Or is this just an aggregate and flip game? So if it's not solely economic, if you're looking to take a step back, if you want help from an administrative perspective, then you damn sure better make sure you partner with a DSO that's got infrastructure, that's actually prepared to help you accomplish your goals and is going to be a good partner. So I think those two reasons, not doing proper diligence, not clearly defining your why, that's how doctors end up selling to the wrong DSO or potentially selling prematurely before they were actually ready, whether economically or emotionally, to go to market in the first place.
So how often do docs not go with the highest offer or the kind of quote unquote best offer, but go with the right fit? Out of 10 docs,
great question.
Are 8 of them following the money and 2 of them following their heart? Or, what is the split that you see?
So in an ideal process, our goal is to leverage the competition to find the right fit and then negotiate the best economics with the DSO that you feel is the best fit. Oftentimes, through the way we navigate the process, we're actually able to marry those two things.
Cool.
You end up with the highest offer from the DSO that you like the most. Now, there are instances where very disciplined DSOs that really sell based on fit and culture won't be the highest offer.
Yeah.
And depending on who the client is, more frequently than you would think, they will choose that DSO from a fit and deal structure perspective over an initial valuation perspective. And I appreciate that because, like you said, you're not going anywhere. You need to be able to work alongside these people. And also from an equity perspective, like we talked about in the last episode, there's always going to be an equity component. The second bite of the apple could be as big or bigger than the first bite of the apple. So don't get, worked up just over the initial valuation. you might choose to partner with somebody who paid a little bit more on the front end, but maybe their equity wasn't worth as much. They weren't set up in a way to be sustainable and accomplish their financial goals. And at recap, had you sold to the other DSO that maybe had a lower valuation on the front end, you would have come out ahead because they got a higher multiple at recap. They hit a liquidity event sooner than the other DSO that maybe paid a little bit more on the front end, but wasn't positioned as well to be successful over time. You know, something funny that I always kind of tell my clients is you always want that DSO to pay an outrageous price for your practice, and you want them to underbid every other practice owner they buy from that point forward to protect your equity. So you got to be careful. If someone's paying some stupid price for your practice,
They're probably paying a stupid price for a lot of practices.
and then what does that mean for your equity?
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. So, and I think that covered also the not asking the right questions. Are there anything that you see just like blatant questions that should be asked that are not asked commonly?
I think you need to understand, everything you can about the DSO, but who their financial sponsor is, what's their pedigree, have they been successful in dental before, have they been successful in other medical verticals, really understand where their money's coming from. I think that's critically important. Meet their management team and understand the pedigree of the people that are captaining the ship on a daily basis. Do they have real infrastructure or not? Because we're in the middle of a reckoning. We talked about this earlier, and a lot of the DSOs that don't have real infrastructure don't have operational pedigree. They haven't really integrated and operated the practices that they've bought over the past 5 years. By and large, those are the DSOs that are in trouble.
They're in full stop panic mode right now.
And they don't have money, so they can't continue to acquire EBITDA. So the only way you continue to create arbitrage and grow is through organic growth. Well, the only way you stimulate organic growth is you actually have to operate the asset
Really well. Yeah.
really, really well.
Yeah.
And those that weren't really set up to operate the assets long term, it's very difficult for them to generate same store sales growth. So the other thing you need to ask is, what's going to change, right? Are you going to change my practice management software?
Yeah.
Are you going to change my staff benefits, their comp, things that will maybe seem, especially like the PMS, it might seem like that's a small change, but it could be a mass disruption in the culture and the mood of your staff.
Yes.
And if you get the staff on the wrong side of this deal, that can tank your practice pretty quick.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that they're going to respect your team. Benefits, payroll is going to be same or better. They're not going to make these overarching changes. You want to know what you're getting yourself into. And then obviously we unpacked a great deal of detail about DSO deal structures on the last episode, asking all those questions about how the equity functions, what your rights are, what it looks like on a daily basis, a monthly basis, what it looks like at recap. You need to really understand how that equity component functions, because that's going to be a substantial element to the overall economic outcome of your deal over the course of 3 to 5 years.
Well, and it's funny because I mentioned my friend who sold. He had a bustling practice with a partner, really good EBITDA, really good offer, and he was talking like, should I sell? And it's been a few years now, so I've gotten to talk to him through the whole journey. And I told him the things that you're going to hate is there's going to be changes. At first, in particular, you are still going to have to deal with the headaches at the practice level. Sure. You're not going to be able to spend money willy-nilly the way you want to. So like new equipment, new this, that, or the other. All of a sudden you have to ask someone to spend money.
Right, or like taking your wife to a fantastic dinner and writing it off to the practice or whatever it may be.
You can't do that anymore. Yeah. So you're still going to have a lot of the day-to-day operational headaches. You are not going to be able to spend money. You're going to get way less kind of cash flow on an ongoing basis. And you're going to have a boss. And knowing my friend, I told him, you're going to be a little miserable at first.
It's going to be an adjustment for sure, a big adjustment.
And he was, but he had done his due diligence on the who. And as time has gone on, he's like, they are such good operators. Like the team that they have, he's like, my regional manager who's working with our office, like she's just so smart and so good. Like she offers us this amazing professional advice. She works with us. We've finally found another associate who's working with us. That's been made a big difference in like the amount of clinical stress and load I've had to bear.
He's no longer an island unto himself, right? He's got support.
Totally. But it took well over
a year. Settle into it.
Yeah, to like feel comfortable with it all. And then going in person and meeting and seeing his holdover equity grow over time and seeing where the company's going and the recap events and the markets they're expanding into. It's like, oh, I'm actually really excited about their long-term vision, my money that I've got invested with them, and what that can do for me. But it's been an evolution. So he asked the right questions. He had the right expectations.
He knew what his why was.
He knew what his why was. It was still challenging, but now on the backside, he's like, yeah,
he doesn't regret it.
I made the right choice, not just financially, but now also for operating on an ongoing basis. And so it's been really cool to see that for him. I was worried for a minute, I was a little worried that like it was one of these like, well, I couldn't turn the money down, so I went with this, but I'm just going to wash my hands and then leave and do my own thing somewhere else. Now he's very bought into where they're going as a company and very excited to be part of it all.
Right, and that's where we want our clients to land. Our entire process is designed so that by the time you sign a letter of intent, even well before closing, you know why you decided to go down the DSO road in the first place. You know that you didn't leave any value on the table, that you maximize the outcome. You know why you partnered with this particular DSO and why you went after this particular deal structure. We got to check all those boxes before you ink an LOI. And then we also got to watch how the DSO behaves in closing. Because as negotiations occur, as difficult conversations come up, through that negotiation process, gauging how they handle it,
they're going to show their colors.
It gives you a temperature of what life is going to look like post-affiliation.
Yeah. Is there a whole bunch of like trying to screw you right at the end and then handling the conversations really poorly? Or, yeah, there might be some surprises, but like how did it all go down?
Yeah, I mean, look, negotiations are nuanced from deal to deal, and it's emotionally charged and financially charged process.
Yep.
So, them not trying to push you to close too quickly or push to meet your staff too quickly, how they handle the integration process, how they handle the legal agreements and the closing process, how they communicate. I think you need to pay attention to all of that during the closing process because it is indicative to some degree of what life's going to look like post-close.
So the last mistake that we kind of had to talk about, well, and I guess I skipped over not controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA. We talked about this a little bit before.
We did. Yeah. I mean, everybody's focused on the EBITDA multiple, but you need to focus on the EBITDA. The EBITDA moves the needle far more than the multiple. You don't want your buyer controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA or you're going to get screwed, period. That's the place where DSOs play more games than ever. As far as valuation is concerned, manipulating the EBITDA in an unfavorable manner is the easiest trick that DSOs use to drive down valuation. So they'll dangle the carrot of some sexy multiple. I'm going to give you 8 times EBITDA. That's higher than market. Nobody else will bid 8 times EBITDA. But what you may not know is that they're bidding on an EBITDA figure that's actually $300,000 lower than your true EBITDA. So that 8's actually a 6. They're actually paying under market, but they're framing it in a way that makes it look like that unsolicited offer is attractive. So controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA is a huge way that we move the needle. And it's one of the primary ways that when we tell these case studies about the unsolicited offer versus the final valuation, a lot of that is not just moving the EBITDA multiple. Most of it is resetting the stage and controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA itself. So we might move the multiple by a turn, but if we move the multiple by a turn and we move the EBITDA by $200,000, that's an exponential increase in valuation.
Absolutely. And it's also why you want to make sure your business is at the point where you focus on growth for a while and then you focus on EBITDA for a little while and then you're ready to have these conversations. So you don't want to be caught in this like growth phase trying to sell too early and the EBITDA is not there and now you're not multiplying. Your multiplier doesn't really matter if the number is not reasonable.
Yeah, and we surprise a lot of clients. We get through that valuation process, through the EBITDA process, and most people in our position are going to try to convince them to go to market as fast as possible. They're trying to get from, that conversation to a commission as fast as they can. A lot of times we're trying to talk people out of selling to a DSO because it's not a good fit, right? Their why is not a good fit for what a DSO offers. Or for some reason or another, we don't feel like it's the right time for them to go to market. If there's still a lot of growth to be achieved and they're okay with putting in the effort to accomplish that growth pre going to market, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's wait a year and let's go to market at the appropriate time and maximize the outcome rather than going to market prematurely. If you're at a point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to grow, but I don't want to do it on my own. All right, then let's make sure that as we negotiate the offers, we have some type of growth-related earnout where you're going to have a secondary valuation payout predicated upon the growth of whether it's revenue or EBITDA post-close. So that way, if you are going to sell in an upswing, we make sure that you don't leave all that value on the table. There's going to be a secondary payout if the practice achieves the growth that you think is upcoming.
Absolutely. Well, are there any other mistakes that you feel like you've seen and that are ones to watch out for?
I think the last thing is just falling for a gimmick. On the previous episode, we talked about the roll-up concept, duct taping together a bunch of unaffiliated, unintegrated practices with the promise that you're going to sell at a much higher multiple than you will on your own. Don't chase that unicorn. You're never going to find it. So staying away from the roll-up concept, making sure you're really careful about, where you get your information, right? I mean, all of us know we need to be careful about where we consume our news, right? It's no different in the DSO marketplace. Who's driving the narrative and what's their agenda? You need to understand that there's a lot of people out there that are influencers offering guidance, and it's designed to benefit them and not necessarily you. So be very, very careful about the advisors you work with. Make sure you do reference checks. Make sure you look at their Google reviews. Whether we're talking about an attorney, a sell-side advisor like us, a consultant, whoever it may be, a dental CPA, you need reference points. Just as you're doing diligence on the DSO, you need to do diligence on the team that you're going to build to help you navigate this path. So stay away from the roll-up concept. Be careful about the advisors you choose. And the other thing I'll say is buy-side advisors. So there are buy-side advisors out there that represent the DSOs. They're getting paid by the DSOs to convince you to sell to them and then to basically act as if you're a sell-side advisor. Hey, Doc,
I'm going to representation here.
Yeah, I'm going to take you to like 2 DSOs. They're great. They're going to be great for your practice. I'm going to negotiate the deal on your behalf, and you don't have to pay me anything. They're paying me. Whoever pays your fee is who you represent. So,
does this really happen?
Oh, yeah, this happens. I mean, there are multiple brokers out there that offer to do this for free, and they're actively screwing the doctor when the doctor thinks that they're working on their behalf. So just be really, really careful. This space is the Wild West. There is really no regulatory oversight from a private equity perspective. They have all different types of levers that they can pull to manipulate you. And I'm not saying they're all bad actors,
sure,
right? There's some awesome DSOs. There's some awesome private equity firms. There's some awesome people involved in this space. But you would do a lot of the things that they do if you were in the same position, because at the end of the day, your goal is to generate a return for yourself, for your investors, for your doctor partners. And utilizing a lot of these tactics is the way that you juice those returns. So a lot of you would do the same thing. So I don't really take offense to it, but it's my job to ensure that we protect our clients and get you the best possible outcome.
Well, thank you for 3 meaty episodes of just this world that I feel like can feel extremely confusing and very intimidating, but it's also taboo, and we don't want to talk about it, and people are, we might lose listeners just talking about it for 3 episodes here. But the types of practices, the sizes of practices that we've seen our coaching clients achieve in a very short period of time, all of a sudden, some of these options open up for them. When they go from buying a $1.2 million practice, within 2 or 3 years, they've got a $3 million practice and they've got $1 million of EBITDA. All of a sudden, there's opportunities and there's options and there's unsolicited offers knocking down their door. And I feel like we would be doing them a disservice if we didn't talk about this.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, DSOs are a lightning rod topic. A lot of people hate them and swear, at them. A lot of people swear by them and have had good experiences. So we got involved in the space because in reality, thousands of dentists are going to sell their practices to DSOs, like it or not. And we just want to make sure that they get a fair shake, that they make good decisions, they create optionality, they create leverage, and they ultimately, get what they wanted. They accomplish that why, they accomplish those goals. So I'm here as a resource for your listeners. I hope they'll reach out. Check out our website, dentaltransitions.com. Feel free to text me, call me. You got an offer in front of you and you want me to weigh in on it. You know what I'm already going to say? Yeah. I'm going to say call timeout and let's talk about what's really achievable if we go to the open market. You can reach me at 512-660-8505 or on my email, Brannon, BRANNON @dentaltransitions.com. It's been a lot of fun, Rich, and I appreciate you having me.
Brannon, thank you. We'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.